Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show we have Nathan Sepeda. Nathan is a research coordinator, helps out a lot at Johns Hopkins, and he, gets into it. He's actually a younger person, so folks interested in getting involved in the field might learn a lot here. He's completed his undergrad. We get into what he studied in the episode, some neuroscience and psychology. So, a good background to get into some facilitation. He actually does get the opportunity to facilitate with folks at Hopkins for psilocybin sessions. And I think folks like Mary Casamano and others have mentored him. So quite the interesting set of opportunities post-undergrad. So, it sets the stage well for getting into a grad program, right? But it's a nice shortcut. So thanks, Hopkins, for involving folks without master's degrees. It's helpful for folks not sure on where they want to go in their career yet. So it's a really fun interview. We get into a lot of things, talk a lot about Bufo Alvarius, 5-MeO DMT, some of the psilocybin sessions. I go on a couple exciting rants on 5-MeO DMT, so hold on. And we have a good time. I had fun talking to Nathan. I hope to meet him and get into some more podcast episodes with him. I think he has a bright future in the field, so stay tuned. If you want to support the show, check us out, psychedelicstoday.com. You can get on our email list. There you'll find out about our classes and free ebooks we give out and any kind of upcoming news. So, spoiler, I guess not really a spoiler because I'm just revealing it. We have events coming up, and we would love to see you there. In Phoenix, February 8, 9, 10, I think, there's the Arizona Phoenix Psychedelics Conference. It's, I guess, Phoenix. Yeah, who knows? Just Google Psychedelic Conference Phoenix. You'll find it. It's in Tempe, where the university is. It's actually at Naturopathy School, which the organizers... or one of the organizers attends as a naturopath student. So really cool. I like those guys and really looking forward to the conference. Kyle and I are putting on a breathwork workshop before the conference, the Friday night before. So if you want to check that out, cool. And, email them asking if you want to do breathwork, just ask. So what else? You could check us out on Patreon. We would love... It's a monthly support, small as $2 a month, would really help us a lot. And always just tell your friends about the show. We would love more listeners. I'd love to hear from you also. You can email us over at psychedelicstoday@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you on the other side. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Nathan Sepeda, a research coordinator at Hopkins. What's your title over there?
Yeah, research coordinator.
Cool. Yeah, great to talk to you.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Absolutely. So this is our second time recording, but we'll do a great job this time. And yeah. So recently, Hopkins put out a poster on 5-MeO DMT, and I think that's what got you on my radar. So let's dig in. Can you speak a little bit about what that poster was?
Yeah, definitely. So I was working on a team with the people at Hopkins, including Alan Davis, who originally put together this survey that people answered questions about their 5-MeO DMT experiences. The survey consisted of people that belonged to more the general population group. These people most likely used 5-MeO DMT in more of a recreational setting, maybe a friend's house, their house. And then there was also a second group that used it in a more structured setting. These people practiced a lot of the similar techniques that we do in our Hopkins studies as far as providing a safe and supportive environment for the psychedelic experience, as well as spending some time prior to build rapport with their practitioner or facilitators, and then as well as time afterwards to just unfold and discuss their experience. So we have those survey responses, and we were interested in taking a closer look at if there are differences in people from the structured group and the more general population group to see what type of influence set and setting or context has on some of the more positive outcomes of the psychedelic experience. It was really interesting. We found that people in the structured group were much more likely to endorse a mystical type experience. So these are experiences that are characterized by feelings of awe or amazement, gain of insightful experiences, maybe experiences with a deity, those sort of things. And they were also less likely to have challenging experiences, and the level of challenge was less intense.
Right. I don't know if I told you this, but I believe I talked to a person who ran one of these underground groups that provided data to your study. And he was using synthetic 5-MeO DMT, and I don't know how true this is, but he claimed to be getting some of the quote-unquote best results out of all the different survey samples. Is that something you can speak about at all, or is that kind of too anonymous? Or
I'm actually not even sure who that person is, so I can't speak to that.
Good. All right, cool. Very interesting setup that person has using some sort of noble gases and whatever else. It sounds a little overcomplicated to me, but I understand the intention. Anyway, did you notice in your document or your poster any differences between synthetic and toad-derived 5-MeO DMT?
So we actually only looked at synthetic in our context. We found that because that's what is more generally used on a research level, we wanted to look at the effects of synthetic. And looking at past papers that Alan Davis published earlier in 2018, using both these samples who reported toad and synthetic use, looking at the levels of mystical experience and positive effects there, the effects are actually not that different when looking at toad and synthetically inhaled, or the population that we used in this group. So no real reason to use toad, but yeah, we really only looked at synthetic and found really promising results with that group.
Right. So not everybody listening has kind of like a research or academic background, right? Like speaking about data, speaking about like sample sizes might not be something they typically do. There's this idea of like N of 1. That's an N of 1, meaning that's a sample size of just you. So it could just be an outlier. Like there's a chance you fall in that 10% group that has a different set of results. So once in a while, people will report the toad is so much different, but largely the people I speak to report no difference, which is really interesting to me.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like the problem is it's such a strong experience that it's people get religious about it, which may or may not be a problem. But you know, religion can cause problems around thinking scientifically. It's not necessarily the case, but you know, if you have an ideology, of course, you're going to kind of push against the actual data from scientific research.
Right. Proponents of using 5-MeO DMT from the Bufo toads usually just have this fixation or strong belief that it's the toad doing it, but synthetic works just as well, and you're not getting all the other constituents that you would get from the toad venom, so it's a lot safer in that sense too.
So the first time I kind of ran into data around 5-MeO DMT was at the Oakland Psychedelic Science Conference in 2017, I guess, or 16.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when that was, but it was an awesome conference. And did you make it there?
Yeah, that was 2017. Great conference. So many good speakers.
It was pretty incredible. Stan Groff kind of opened with a keynote speaking about 5-MeO DMT, quote unquote, being the future of psychiatry, which is kind of bombastic. He makes these statements here and there. I'm a pretty strong devotee of Stan, so it's, tricky. But, he says, he titled his books The Psychology of the Future a while back, to raise eyebrows, and people go, "Oh, you're a jerk. Like, why are you using a title like that?" But it's, who else is going to pick up a book on psychology, unless you've got a wild title like that, right? So,
right.
Saying things is just a way to get attention, and I think, in a sense, he's probably right. Well, it's yet to be proven, but it fits into a short session. You could radically reduce costs around psychiatric care if like the supposition that it works kind of like has similar results to MDMA therapy or psilocybin therapy, and it fits into a much shorter period of time. It could be made substantially cheaper than a lot of these other therapies that are projected to cost $10,000+ for the series. So, food for thought there. And then, downstream, I started hanging out at the symposia stage a lot. And they had Dr. Jerry Sandoval there. I'm not the biggest fan of him after watching some of the stuff he did on Hamilton's show. Kind of facilitating over some bare rocks and rivers. And I saw a lot of room for injury. Maybe I'm a little hyper vigilant, but I just think we should do everything possible to reduce risk and injury.
Yeah, definitely.
Others don't agree, but
yeah,
and they're critical of people that disagree. So anyway, he was talking a lot about how much better Toad was, and I was just like kind of rolling my eyes the whole time. But as data starts coming out from groups like yours, we have some data to lean on. Like, is he really speaking truly, or are people that say that are speaking truly? And who knows? Like, maybe they have a special breed of toad and they put some stuff on. I don't know. So people should think about that. And there's no real reason to smoke Bufo Alvarius over synthetic, other than perhaps you think it's more available, but it's on the dark
web. Even that's a slippery slope, because their population is drastically declining. So the use of toad 5-MeO DMT is harmful to the toads, and if it's impacting their health and causing them to die out, or just reducing the prevalence of the toads in general, there's not going to be that much available to those people that want to use toad.
Yeah. So one of the tricky things about this discussion is it's kind of similar, right? We have observational studies. We don't have a real study about toad populations right now. There's Rack Razum, I think, is leading this group called something Arcana. There's some group out there doing it, but it's kind of potentially biased because it's by toad activists, like people who really believe in the toad over synthetic. There's better ways to do that research. So, I talked to Dr. Andrew Wheel, who lives in the desert right near the Mexican border in the Sonoran Desert. They used to jump into his house all the time, but now he never sees them ever. It's been years since he's seen them. So
wow.
The changes are there's environmental factors that are in the mix there. There's also, development, like UV, street lights. They flock to street lights and people can scoop them up or run them over or whatever. So a lot of factors. It's not just harvesting for drug use, right? It's like just humans being there.
Right.
When they used to not be in the desert so much in such great numbers. Yeah, I think like the talk track is how do we do less harm to living things and treat our environment better. And we can learn a lot about treating our environment better. And even, like contamination, like we could carry molds or something, or could contaminate a whole family or neighborhood of these things, and knock them out. So there's a lot of ways to reduce harm, even when you're doing that. And, I think I told you we're putting out a class on this. Did we? On toad conservation?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it briefly.
Right. It's going to be pretty interesting. Dr. Andrew Weil did contribute. We've got a herpetologist, naturalist living in Tucson, doing a lot of desert research himself, and he's out there every day looking at stuff and observing and reporting back, and some others too, heavy in the 5 world that you're probably familiar with. So
awesome.
Stay tuned. Looking forward
to seeing that.
Follow us on our email list or wherever to find out more. So I guess let's kind of talk a little bit about your role at Hopkins.
Yeah, so I am the research coordinator of the psychedelic studies at Hopkins, and that involves quite a few things. I work as an assistant facilitator or a guide for the psychoactive drug sessions. So I get to be involved with the psilocybin studies we're currently running the depression study. We've done some brain imaging studies. So it's really awesome. And I feel very lucky and privileged to be part of that. And along with that is a lot of, data management and organizational logistic things. But definitely the guiding aspect is the more exciting part of the job, and being able to see the transformations that happen with people just literally within days. So yeah, I've been working there for about 2.5 years at this point, and very excited to be here.
Is it largely psilocybin that you work with there in those sessions?
Yeah, that's mostly what we're doing right now. It's just the most researched psychedelic substance out there. So it just tends to be the one that gets accepted with grants and funding and whatnot.
Do you offhand know what kind of organizations are issuing grant money to Hopkins for a lot of this?
No, not offhand.
Okay. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to know. Curious about the training. Like, how did they spin you up to be able to be in there in sessions with folks?
So I have a background in psychology and neuroscience, so that definitely helps kind of get you familiar with the environment and the type of work that's being done here. When I got to Hopkins, Mary Casamano, who is an amazing human being, she is the primary facilitator for all of our studies. And her and I worked pretty closely just discussing sort of the decorum, how you present yourself. And we would run through mock sessions and talk about what types of questions to ask. And most importantly, just advising on how to hold the space. That seems to be the most important aspect of the psychedelic sessions, is holding space in a non-directive manner that really allows people to have their experience and let it unfold without it being impeded with us jumping in and telling them, oh, go towards this, go towards that, tell us about this. And we really just leave that up to the participants. If they want to talk with us, then they're more than welcome to, but otherwise we encourage them to go inwards. So in addition to that, there is a lot of prep that we do with all of our participants. We spend a great deal of time building rapport with them, talking about their life history, and as well as after their experience, spending a good amount of time talking about their experience and how to integrate their experience so it's not just a drug experience, but it's how they can bring it into their life and allow those benefits to unfold and better themselves. There's actually a really good article that was published today in Vox that interviewed Mary Casamano and Alan Davis talking a little bit about this subject.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, Mary's been around for quite a bit doing this work, and that's great. You've got to work with her and her training and mentorship. Are you ever in the room with her working?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's great.
That's the most exciting part, is to be there during session. And her and I have been working very closely these last 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Could you describe some of like the changes you'll see in individuals in the room, like generally, or is it kind of all over the map?
Oh, I don't know if I could generalize because sessions are different for everyone. It's funny, we try to predict or like come up with ideas of what's going to happen, and just about every time we're wildly wrong because you don't know. And the way things unfold for each individual is different. Even the same dose within the same person, if they have multiple sessions, those 2 sessions can vary pretty widely. That's the beauty of it, and the excitement is it gives the person what they need in that moment. So to try to generalize and say the changes I wouldn't be able to do it justice, but people do come back and they might have like this afterglow to them. They just have this big smile on their face and they're very positive spirits. A lot of people will describe their experience as being among the top 5, sometimes even the number 1 most meaningful and spiritually significant event of their life. That's on par with a birth of a child or a large event like that. So it's pretty amazing that people will come in and describe it that way.
I'm curious about stomach sensations. So if you eat a whole bunch of mushrooms, sometimes people throw up or feel uncomfortable in the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that with any regularity with synthetic?
No, not really. Every now and then someone might feel nauseous, but it's not common. We also advise people to not eat a large breakfast. That way, hopefully it's not messing with their gastrointestinal system too much.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, the last number of times I've consumed psychedelics, I've got like a good 20 to 30 minute window where I'm like on the edge of throwing up. I'm like, okay, perfect.
Yeah, not a fun place to be.
Yeah, I make the best of it. Since college, I've been able to laugh about throwing up. So hopefully people can learn a little bit about that for their sessions. So what else? We talked about 5. Did we talk enough about 5-MeO?
I would like to jump back into that and talk about the context aspect of it.
Sure.
Because that's really the most interesting part of this. We were able to break down some of those practices that I just briefly touched on earlier, such as providing a safe space, the use of a practitioner, using with friends, getting the substance from a trusted source, abstaining from sex, alcohol, drugs, things like integrating with a friend. These are all things that we took a look at to see, are there differences between those 2 groups, the structured and the general population, and do those differences contribute to the occurrence of these mystical type experiences that we're talking about? And not really surprising, we found that the use of a practitioner and obtaining the substance from a trusted source are the two highest impact practices that you can do, as well as some of the more ceremonial techniques. And then just going down the list from that, integrating with a friend. That's huge because a lot of people will have their psychedelic experience, say that was cool, and then walk away and that's it. But that integration is really key. And people that do have challenging experiences, if they don't have the opportunity to integrate, that could be damaging to them. That could make them feel more anxious or nervous about the experience. So really having that opportunity is so important to all of these experiences. And I also want to note that these findings are preliminary and correlational. So I don't want to add too much emphasis or overstate these results. But it is a good first step into trying to figure out what is this role of context, because not many people look at it, mainly because it's difficult to manipulate within the realms of a laboratory study, which is why we're doing it here in a survey study. But yeah, it is promising to see these results, and I hope that future studies will continue down this line and try to really tease out those differences and elucidate that influence of context or setting.
Right. So yes, there's we don't have much actual data on 5-MeO DMT yet. And we have to state that this is a survey study, right? Like people reported in data. So this is not like a single batch of 5-MeO DMT qualified with purity, et cetera, right? So street use. But what interesting data coming from street, quote unquote street use. So
and in the structure group, I will mention that the 5-MeO was prepared differently. It actually was tested and prepared, and the dosing is specific to each person. So, and that's another important aspect that people should be wary of before taking a psychedelic is dosing and the preparation where they got the drug.
Right, absolutely. My rant earlier about sample sizes was, I'm coming back to it, more of a question, I guess, about your sample size in the survey, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, definitely. So we do have a pretty large sample size. There were about 570 responses total that we analyzed in this data set. And it's split pretty evenly between the two groups. So 270, 280-ish per each group. So feeling pretty good about the number of responses that we got there.
Right. Yeah. A lot of scientific papers are like 20 people or less often. So that's pretty solid. Do you know if there's plans to try to get something done in-house eventually? I'm sure it's of interest. It's just a matter of getting the funding, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely of interest. It would be cool to do a laboratory study, but yeah, like you said, there's so many moving pieces that all have to come together before that can come to fruition.
To the best of your knowledge, is there any data out there around the composition of vapor 5-MeO DMT from toad or synthetic sources?
I've not actually looked too much into that, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like I get really concerned about the secondary metabolites from the animal. Like there's probably some other stuff in there that could do some harm, and possibly we don't know. But,
right, there's so many other things that the toad has. There's other venoms, and we don't know what's in there.
Yeah, I keep coming back to this religious angle because people get super, like, if there was something to get religious about, it's psychedelics, right? Like it's pretty quick to show you, hey, there's some crazy stuff going on here. What is this? And people want to put meaning to it right away. And oh, look, this gentleman over here, or this lady over here has a full religious system we can just apply to our experience, and now we're part of the religion. And I want people to be aware that this pattern has played out plenty of places previously. This isn't a phenomena that came about when 5-MeO DMT began being smoked. Yeah, I get really nervous around 5-MeO DMT because I see so much wacky behavior, like culty behavior, and there's people really getting hurt in some of those religious communities. And like I really wish I could just like step away from it, but multiple people have been killed or hurt in these ceremonies, and it's not just with 5-MeO DMT, right? They're adding in other stuff, and there's one gentleman that goes around tasing people in ceremony or throwing water on people's faces when big buckets of water when they're high. The
waterboarding, the sexual assaults,
right?
All that. Like it just really speaks to the value of trying to screen your practitioners too.
Right. Like, what are your practices? What does your ceremony look like?
Yeah, and, where they're getting their substance and how much they're giving.
Yeah, I was reading one of these facilitators who will go unnamed was talking about using an extremely high dose on all his patients, and in my opinion, to a dangerous degree. Like the dose is way too high, far above the effective dose. That said, toad venom is highly variable in its 5-MeO DMT concentration. So, there's no surefire math. It's like one person will get just enough, and then the other person will get 8 times too much. And it's like, is that your math? Just to make sure everybody got an experience. It's like, that's not very fair, safe, or anything.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't benefiting when they get such a high dose like that. Right. So, no good.
So what else is going on in your world at Hopkins that we can dive into for our last little bit here?
So we're currently running a few studies right now. We're looking at the effects of psilocybin and depression, looking at the effects of psilocybin at treating or smoking cessation, treating nicotine addiction. We're doing a brain imaging study with Salvinorin A. We do have a website, so if anyone is curious about those studies, I encourage them to check that out. And we're always trying to roll out new studies. So if they don't see something on there of interest, check back in a couple of months, sign up for our newsletter, get updates about the new studies coming out.
And people can enroll or at least apply on a federal site. Is it clinicaltrials.gov if they wanted to be a participant?
So clinicaltrials.gov will provide a lot of information about the study. So another great resource that I'd recommend. But to apply, you'd have to contact us directly. So you can contact us via email. There's a contact box on our website as well, where you can choose the study you're interested in. So if anyone's interested in applying, please do check that out.
Right. Cool. And once in a while, is there room for healthy volunteers?
Yeah, definitely. Every study is different. So every study is looking for a different type of person. We have run healthy volunteer studies in the past, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so in the future.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. There's so many drugs we need to run research on, right? Like the fact that this stuff has been illegal for decades, and now we can finally do it again, or at least, whatever. Do you know when it started at Hopkins? Was it like late 90s?
It started in 2000.
Okay.
So that's when they were really getting it off the ground, and it really picked up mid 2000s when Roland and the team were publishing those reports that showing safety and efficacy of these substances. And since then, it's just blown up.
Yeah, it really has. From what I recall, Roland is like the perfect person to go through all this federal paperwork with like patience and like just the willingness to go through the brutality of this kind of research. And thank goodness we have somebody that loves paperwork like that, has the patience, and it's really great.
Yeah, definitely. And he has a strong background in working with the FDA as well. So he's definitely in a good place to get involved with this research.
Right. Absolutely. Let's see. Is there anything else interesting happening there? We got a few more minutes.
We are working on survey studies. There is it's called an insight survey. So people that have had psychedelic experiences and felt that they have gained some insight, they can take that survey, talk about their experiences, and contribute to the research if they live further away and can't make it out to Baltimore. Survey studies are a great way to help out. And we're always working on more survey studies too. So stay tuned.
That's really great. I think the cost benefit to survey studies is huge. Like you can get a tremendous amount of interesting preliminary data.
Absolutely.
How do scientists talk about preliminary data? Is that a good phrasing? Or how would you speak to it?
So preliminary is often used before something is published. Because to go through the process, you have to get it peer reviewed and accepted. So preliminary is really just speaking to what stage you're at in getting the data public.
Right.
And survey studies are great. They are able to, tap into this resource of reaching thousands and thousands of people. But the ideal is a laboratory study.
Right. Absolutely. Controlled everything. And
exactly.
Are you hearing, so I forget what the name of the book was, or even where I read it, but we were talking about like this jump from just kind of standard experimentation, then moving towards like double-blinded, placebo-controlled, and then, perhaps what the benefit is of doing like triple or like beyond, like is there a benefit in there? Like, have you seen any studies using that kind of method, or is that a little overboard?
Well, I have recently just randomly seen studies labeling theirs as quadruple blind.
Whoa.
Where the study team is blind, the participants blind, their doctors or physicians who are also involved are blinded, and then there's one more that I can't think of, but
their pet.
Yeah, right. But really, double-blind, placebo-controlled double-blind trials are sort of that gold standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more blinding is always great. It just controls the study even further.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think... Oh, man. I feel like it was a Yuval Harari book, Sapiens, or something along those lines, talking about the benefit that the double-blind method has brought humanity. It's like huge. I'm probably citing the wrong book, but something along those lines, like how big of a boost that was in our knowledge and certainty of knowledge and predictability.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's always going to be biases and expectancy effects if you're privy to what you're going to receive.
Right. Yeah. So that reminds me of a bad scenario. We can kind of wrap on this bad scenario. But somebody sat down with a shaman, quote unquote shaman, using the word extremely loosely, and they thought they were going to smoke standard DMT, colloquially NN-DMT, and he swapped in 5-MeO DMT, which is also an NN-DMT, just for clarity, people. So this person just dumped in a very different drug, a very different experience, and then was just getting like pumped for information, like blackmail style, Scientology style, and it was like brutal to hear about this. So people, just because someone has access to drugs, is willing to give you those drugs, and help you through that experience, that doesn't make them necessarily the right person. Be careful. That's all I'm saying. Do your research. Any safety you can throw in is worth it.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So Nathan, where can people find out more about Hopkins and what we're up to over there?
If they go on to hopkinspsychedelic.org, they'll be able to find out all the information about our lab, our studies, past studies, and as well as contact information if they're interested in participating in a study. So definitely encourage people to look into that website if they are interested.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time, Nathan Sepeda. Thank you, and I hope we get to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, Nathan Sepeda of Johns Hopkins University. You can learn more at Hopkins Psychedelic, I believe. Just Google Johns Hopkins Psychedelic, you'll find the website. So let us know what you think. Email us psychedelicstodayemail@gmail.com. If you want to get in touch with Nathan, we can help you out there. If you're a young person in psychedelics, let us know what major questions you have. Again, psychedelicstodayemail@gmail.com. We'd love to know what you thought of this episode. And if you want to engage our community in some conversation, we got well over 1,000 folks on Facebook talking about episodes, asking each other questions, mutual support, stuff like that. It's really a great group. On Facebook, it's over at Psychedelics Today group. So just search that or go to our page at Psychedelics Today on Facebook and you can find us there. And the group should be linked and you can engage the whole community of Psychedelics Today listeners and followers. I guess events coming up. We have that Phoenix conference, Tempe, which is essentially Metro Phoenix where the university is. It's a beautiful college town. We'll be there early February for that conference doing some breath work. We will also be tabling the whole time too. So if you want to hang out, come hang out, talk to us at the table, check out some merch we're selling to try to fund the trip. That would be cool. And always just love listening, meeting listeners. And what else? Oh, just, I really think it's a good idea for you to get on our email list. You can get there, psychedelicstoday.com. We will be putting out some interesting announcements, and I think you're going to be excited about some of them. So check it out, psychedelicstoday.com, get on our email list, and we will keep you apprised of all the fun things happening. Again, if you want to just support us, patreon.com/psychedelicstoday or psychedelicstodayshop.com. Again, linked from all our other sites, and you can find our merch and stuff there. Great t-shirts, sweatshirts, whatever. I think that's it. Hope you enjoyed the episode. See you next time around.